In this video, we're going to continue our study of factoring polynomials. This example is different than the one in part one because in textbooks, it will refer to it as ax squared plus bx plus c, where the a now is not 1. In the previous video, I talked about factoring where the leading coefficient is 1. In this case, we're going to have various numbers. So here are the steps on doing this. I'm going to work through 2 examples. So step 1, we multiply the first and the last number together. So in this case, we get a positive 6. All right, now we want to find factors of this number that add up to give us the middle term, in this case, b. All right, so what are 2 factors of 6 that give us negative 7? And we know that they are now negative 6 and negative 1. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to rewrite, replace, and then rewrite. So what this means is in this original equation, the first term, we're going to rewrite it. I'm going to put a plus sign, and you'll see why in a second. And then I'm going to rewrite the last term. Now this replace, what's going to happen is the factors are going to go in here. Now typically, what's going to happen is the bigger of the numbers, the bigger absolute value of the numbers is going to go first, and the smaller of the absolute value of the numbers will go second. And you'll see why in a minute. Now what we want to do is regroup the parentheses. So what happens is we're going to distribute the x to both of those terms. So now what happens is we get 3x squared minus 6x, so the minus 6 times the x. Now we have a minus x plus 2. So what we want to do is regroup these and then put a plus sign between them. Right? Now what we want to do is take the greatest common factor out of the first parenthesis and out of the last. So the greatest common factor in this first parenthesis is going to be a 3x, and we're left with an x minus 2. And then the greatest common factor out of the second parenthesis is a negative 1, and we're left with x minus 2. Now, if you want to recheck and make sure that you did this correctly, just remultiply it. So 3x times x gives you 3x squared. 3x times negative 2 gives you a negative 6x. So this one works. Negative 1 times x gives you a negative x. Negative 1 times negative 2 gives you a positive 2. So we're good. Now what happens, if you notice, is that the 2 parenthesis terms are identical. So what happens is we're going to combine the non-parenthesis terms into a parenthesis. And then the 2 parenthesis terms are going to combine into a single parenthesis. And now we have factored that particular polynomial. All right, so let's try another one using the same steps. Multiply the first and the last. So we get negative 18. All right, negative 18. So now we need to get factors that add up to a positive 7. Well, if we had 9 and a negative 2, that would give us a positive 7 and a negative 18. So now we're going to rewrite 6x squared we have our parenthesis term, and then we have minus 3. So we're going to rewrite the first and the last, and we're going to replace the middle. We're going to replace the middle with 2 terms. So again, the bigger number should go first, like so. Now we're going to distribute this. So we would end up with 6x squared plus 9x. Again, remember the x comes from over here. Minus 2x minus 3. Okay? And then we're going to put parentheses around these and then put a plus sign in between them. Okay, so if that step's a little confusing, slow it down, walk it through word by word. All right, now we're going to take the greatest common factor of this, which happens to be 3x, and we're left with 2x here. So 3 times 2 is 6, x times x is x squared. All right, if we take 3x out, we're left with 3 here. Okay, and again, 3x times 3 gives us a positive 9x. All right, over here, we're gonna factor out a negative 1, right? So why that's important is because it's hard to see what they both have in common, but we want something that matches this. So to get this term and this term to match, we have to pull out a negative 1 out of that term. So what's left over is going to be a 2x plus 3. So we have negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. So now we have 2 common parentheses. And now we're going to combine the non-parentheses into a term. Okay? And now we have it factored. So this technique is really easy to use. The only calculating you really need to do is the beginning, and then understand how to pull out greatest common factor.